Luna here, and tonight we're here to find out, can you beat Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines with only unarmed damage? First, the rules. We can only deal damage with our fists or by feeding. I decided to allow combat feeding because it's based on the Unarmed Combat feat. Conversely, this means that if I decide to do like a ranged damage or melee damage only run, by that same logic, combat feeding won't be allowed during those, so we'll see if that comes back to bite me. Non-damaging disciplines, armor, and artifacts are allowed. Non-combat feats such as hacking and lockpicking are also allowed. Sneaking is allowed, but stealth kills are not. No cheats or gameplay mods other than the Unofficial Plus Patch. With that settled, I'd like to take a moment to thank our channel members. In the You Broke the Tip Jar tier, we have Ginger Knight, Forgotten God, and Ugu the Monk. In the bigger tip jar tier, we have K Plays Music and Games, Blackwood, and Ying. And finally, in the tip jar tier, we have Ragnarok, Tox, Wezu, Ace of Kestrels, Jack1165, Naru Agility, Zachary Smith, and Thomas Quack. Thank you for your support. Seriously, ever since the algorithm just decided to cut everyone's viewership in half, it's the main thing keeping this channel going. The most obvious choice for our clan would be Gangrel, what with the protein claws and all, but as much as I hate to admit it, a Brujah may be stronger based on how much ass our freaking Toreador kicked with Celerity in the Bloodbags only run. Too bad City Gangrel isn't an option. Protean, Celerity, and Obfuscate would rock. I've sung Celerity's praises, but Potence is nothing to sneeze at, and I may experiment with Presence. Our Toreador didn't have blood to spare for it until late in her run, so we never really used it, but lowering opponents' wits and attack speed may come in handy now that we can feed. Brujah also get a small bonus to the Unarmed Combat feat. The Plus Patch adds histories, and we pick True Brujah. This does not give us the time shenanigans discipline, which frankly seems like a blessing considering it gives up Celerity for the glorious ability to tell what time it is. But it allows us to put 2 starting dots in wits by reordering the priority of our attributes. Speaking of feats, they're what matter for nearly all actions, and ranged and melee combat are the only ones we have no use for. Well, those in inspection, but it's always useless. That eliminates perception, firearms, melee, and investigation, but everything else has some use. We want unarmed combat, combat defense, lockpicking, and hacking to start us off, which puts our focus on strength, dexterity, wits, brawl, dodge, security, and computer. Persuasion, sneaking, and research would be nice too. We'll gain enough sneaking from raising dexterity for lockpicking to get by with minimal investment in stealth. Persuasion and research require going further out of our way, but scholarship raises both, so that'll help. We start with 2 strength, 3 wits, 2 brawl, 1 dodge, 2 security, and 1 scholarship. We could have taken 3 in brawl, but that might prevent us from taking advantage of the Brawl book. It's a mid-level book, so it can only raise Brawl if it's 2 or 3, and we can't reach it until after we've done part of the Plague Bear quests downtown, which may require us to get the free dot in Brawl from Nines first, depending on if we can talk to Damsel or not before talking to him. I'm not certain. If we can reach that book before training with Nines, then oh well, we wasted a bit of XP. Our free discipline dot goes into Celerity. We once again have to skip the tutorial because it requires us to stealth kill, which is against the rules. So we have to spend most of our starting money buying a lockpick from Tripp's pawn shop. I know there's a free one in the rail yard outside the warehouse, but I really like to be able to pick locks before then because some side quests do require it, such as the one to get the werewolf blood in the clinic. Not that our first task requires lockpicking. We have to fetch chemicals from a beach house that the local Camarilla ghoul, Marcurio, lost when thugs decided to beat the crap out of him instead of trading. We sneak around behind the thug outside so we can feed. We don't have to be undetected to feed, but it meant we got a couple tries before the thug had a chance to retaliate. After that, we used Celerity and wiped the floor with his friends. Unfortunately, Mercurio doesn't know what we're supposed to do with the chemicals we retrieved, and the only vampire who does is hiding because the local baron, Therese, is angry with him, so we have to convince Therese to call off the feud. First, though, rapid-fire side quests. We got meds from Mercurio and Trip, as well as werewolf blood for the prince from the clinic, which required us to put a second dot in research and charisma to convince the receptionist we were from the IT department, allowing us to wander around the restricted area on the second floor freely. We also grabbed a computer's book while we were there so we could hack the cameras. Our lockpicking wasn't high enough to get into the safe with Trip's meds, but we used blood buff to briefly raise our dexterity enough to pick it. We also freed a thin blood, Lily, and got chewed out by the blood bag vendor, Vandal, for letting his donor go. While a happy Vandal isn't nearly as critical as it was for the blood bags only run, the replanting a Lily quest to lure in a new donor gives 2 XP and avoids a minor boss fight in another side quest, so we tell him we'll replace what we lost. We have to take a third dot of research. The true Bruja thing is kinda panning out from a roleplay perspective, but we can convince Gimbal, the limb enthusiast, to visit the blood bank if we have at least 5 persuasion during the A Bounty for the Hunter quest, which allows us to complete replanting a lily without losing humanity, and a bounty for the hunter without fighting Gimbal. Back to what we're supposed to be doing, Therese says she'll call off the feud if we help her deal with ghosts haunting a hotel she recently acquired. I consider this quest to be a bit of a pace killer. I personally don't find it scary in the way I find the first Amnesia or classic Silent Hills games scary. There are no skill checks and little risk of death. Don't get me wrong, I love the atmosphere of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Given the age of the game and the limited time and resources Troika was working with, the streets of LA are dark, grimy, and brooding in the best possible way. And even the ruined hotel looks pretty cool. I also love how each clan has 2 unique player characters, and Malkavian and Nosferatu in particular have so much special content. But that doesn't change the fact that, especially on subsequent playthroughs, this quest is boring. I think the game heard me because we got stuck in the kitchen doorway and one shot by a flying pan. Other than that hiccup, we had no issues getting the amulet connected to the ghosts, and we picked up a dodge book along the way. We meet Therese's sister, Jeanette, when we return to their nightclub, Asylum. She asks for the amulet, but that's a trap, and this time we can't even slash the paintings at Gallery Noir for her. We tried, but apparently we can't rip paintings with our bare hands. It requires a melee weapon. I do wonder if the protein claws would work for that. We'll definitely try whenever we get around to playing Gangrel, even if we're not restricted to unarmed. But moving on, you could argue we aren't doing damage with the knife, but this quest is skippable, so we'll skip it to be on the safe side. Jeanette must have had someone standing by to trash the gallery, though, because there are cops outside when we walk by not 2 minutes later. I choose to believe she dementated Chuck into doing it. Therese still thinks we did it, because of course that's what Jeanette told her, but we soothe her with the amulet and diary from the hotel. She sends us to the diner to smooth things over with Jeanette, but we only find thugs when we arrive. We tear them apart easily with the help of celerity, turn one into a Capri Sun, and head back to Asylum to find out what the hell's going on. Therese and Jeanette are in the middle of a heated argument that's about to turn deadly. Unfortunately, between our lack of seduction and inability to tear canvas, Jeanette's affinity is too low to convince the sisters to coexist. We have enough persuasion and interacted with Therese the same way our Toreador did, so Jeanette's affinity must be the issue. I don't know if putting a point in subterfuge or appearance to unlock flirty lines would have been enough to sway Jeanette. According to a Steam guide Bill found, the unofficial patch makes seduction unnecessary in order to make reconciliation possible for Nosferatu. So choosing the friendly, or frankly still slightly flirty, regular lines with Jeanette should have been enough if we'd been able to complete Slasher Piece. But we couldn't complete it without a weapon, so we've lost 6 XP. 4 from Slasher Piece and 2 from not getting the reconciliation. Suboptimal outcome or no, the feud is called off so Tongue can take us to the warehouse. Our Toreador had no luck with stealth here, but I decided to try again to make up for part of the XP we lost with the Vormans. We have a dot in stealth from a book we found in another apartment in our building, but 2 sneaking won't get us far, so we put a second dot in dexterity and stealth, bringing us to 4 sneaking for 7 XP. It gets us through the train station, and we step off the platform near a green rail car, pick a lock to cut through a boxcar, slip past a card game, through a door under these stairs, past a patrolling thug, and through the back door to the warehouse. Our Toreador also got this far, but couldn't get past the thugs near this door to the offices. Even if we stayed on the catwalk, they saw us through the window. That also happens this time round, at least with 4 sneaking, so we try bumping stealth and dexterity up to their 3rd dots, which costs a hefty 14 XP. It gets us past them barely if we stay on the far edge of the catwalk, but I don't want to spend so much XP for a 2 XP bonus. That's when I remembered blood buff is good for more than picking locks. Its dexterity buff will get us to 6 sneaking long enough to slip past the window, and from there we have a clear shot to the kaboom desk. I have no idea why 6 sneaking didn't work for our Toreador. Maybe the thugs were in slightly different spots, or I should have tried a few more times. Anyway, we don't have to worry about sneaking after we plant the bomb, so we run like our tail's on fire. We didn't run into any Sabbat, so I assume they only show up if we fight our way in. The prince summons us, allowing us to head downtown, but we blow him off as long as possible. First, we find the Nagaraja in an abandoned hospital and agree to lure a paranormal investigator that saw too much to her. It'll cost humanity, but we've maxed it and she has artifacts to trade. We also visit the Tremere Regent and Damsel to pick up the Plaguebearer quests. We don't have to speak to Nines, so we can get the Brawl book from the first Plaguebearer's room before training with him. However, Nines will only train us if we have less than 4 Brawl. So it turns out starting with 2 Brawl, using the book to raise it to 3, and then having Nines raise it to 4 was still the way to go. If we'd put 3 starting dots in Brawl, we could have benefited from the book or Nines, but not both, as they each require less than 4 Brawl. The first Plaguebearer was hardly worth mentioning. I wouldn't be surprised if the battle is already over and Editing Luna has moved on to the one in the sewers. He's tougher and tears us to shreds on our first attempt. We might have been able to get by with some blood magic, but we had a lot of XP kicking around, so we purchased the 3rd dot of celerity and wiped the floor with him instead. The last Plaguebearer was reluctant to stay in melee this time, which suited us as it allowed us to hide behind cover and heal passively. He also did way less damage with his shotgun than he did with his knife. Then we helped the downtown vendor, Fat Larry, by swiping a briefcase, which amazingly did not require further investment in dex or stealth or blood buff, and got rid of some loan sharks for the owner of the Confession nightclub. We'll now get cash from Confession after every main quest, and we got a 2nd dot in finance from Hilary, although I'm not sure what we'll use all this cash and haggling for. We aren't buying weapons or ammo, so that pretty much leaves armor and maybe blood bags. We finally meet with the prince, and he sends us to the Elizabeth Dane to search for evidence of what happened aboard the ship, particularly anything pertaining to the Ankaran sarcophagus aboard. He also stressed that we need to avoid confronting the police, either by insane fortune or, more likely, the prince pulling some strings. The policeman nearest to where we board the ship thinks we're one of the journalists bribing him for information. We have more than enough persuasion to convince him to hand over the police report the prince wants, and he even clears out the security room so we can access the records room and cameras in peace. He also gives us the password needed to access them, but we hack the computer anyway because I'm playing this on a Steam Deck and hacking is faster than typing with the on-screen keyboard. Getting to and from the security room unseen is simple. Starting from our buddy, we head down a short flight of stairs, keep to the right, go down a hall, and pick the first door on the left. It's an easy lock. And we have free reign of the records room and security room. We can unlock the records room from the security room computer to get the ship manifest, and we can view the sarcophagus with the deck cameras after we turn them on. Then all we have to do is sneak back to our raft. I admit I am kind of curious. I have 2 runs kind of floating around. That Nosferatu without Obfuscate run, I'm guessing you can't talk to the first security guard. Policeman, I should say. Yeah, I'm guessing as a Nosferatu, you can't talk to the policeman. I actually don't know for sure because I have never done a Nosferatu playthrough, so that's going to be fun to find out and navigate when we get to that run. We've done all the available side quests, so we're forced to get on the prince's next task in a timely manner. Our Toreador had a hard time against Grout's test subjects due to her initial aversion to close combat and limited blood supply, but we ripped them apart this time. While we can't stealth kill, we can sneak up and drain them. Funnily enough, they don't seem to notice failed feeding attempts so long as the roaming ones don't spot us, so we're free to attempt to feed over and over until it works. In many ways, this is effectively the same as a stealth kill with the added benefit of blood, but it takes longer, and if we're seen, one of our victim's allies can interrupt us with an attack. I expect that'll be an issue later, but for now we use the Sanguine Surplus to spam celerity. Activating a discipline while it's already active doesn't just reset the timer as it does in most games, it adds its full duration to whatever time it had left. This means with enough blood we can keep disciplines up for a very long while, which is how my Gangrel kept her fortified warm form up pretty much constantly during my first playthrough. Discipline timers do run during conversations and cutscenes though, and sometimes they're just reset at the beginning of boss fights, so we have to bear that in mind. We pick up the Wekapog Thistle and Tarufang, which raise combat defense and lower our chance to frenzy respectively, and I probably butchered their pronunciation, I apologize. We find the ash-covered skeleton of Grout in his room, but don't have time to investigate as the mansion bursts into flames. We run into the arsonist, but he doesn't claim responsibility for Grout, leaving Nines the sole suspect since we ran into him on the way in. There's no way to avoid mentioning Nines when we report to the prince, though, and annoyingly we can't warn the Anarchs about the incoming blood hunt. Despite LaCroix saying he'd need to consider the consequences of declaring a blood hunt on Nines and likely starting a war with the Anarchs, by the time we get to the last round, Nines is gone and Damsel and Skelter are rightfully pissed that we accused Nines. They accept that we may have been a pawn in all this so we can still interact with them, but it would have been nice if we could give them a heads up, especially considering we told Damsel we'd keep her informed of Prince Fancy Water's activities, even if it didn't change anything in the end. We head to the museum to steal the sarcophagus for LaCroix next, and he wants us to avoid making a fuss. The upper part of the museum isn't difficult to sneak through. We have 5 sneaking and the upper floors are open, which is a benefit in Bloodlines as most enemies only perceive us when we're close, even if they have line of sight. The basement, on the other hand, is a disaster. First, we need to disable the cameras. Unlike guards, we do not need to be close for them to raise the alarm. Getting into the security room is tricky as we have to slip by at least 1 camera or maybe 2 depending on which way we go, while also being mindful of the 2 guards wandering around. That isn't the end of the struggle as we have to disable 2 sets of cameras with an on-screen keyboard while those 2 guards I mentioned wander in seemingly at random. I admit there was safe scumming, but we have the hacking to eventually pull it off. With the cameras out of the picture, we have no trouble grabbing an artifact for the Nagaraja and making our way to the next obstacle, a laser grid. Apparently destroying a panel will disable it, but I only recently learned that, so I might try it in the next run. But for now, we went with the break a window, hop into the second security room, disable the lasers, and hop out without being seen method. Oddly, breaking the window and hopping into the room isn't the hard part. Getting back out is. The nearby door is painted on, even though it connects to the hallway past the laser grid, so we have no choice but to scramble back out the window we broke, which is currently being stared at by 2 very confused guards. We tried jumping out on the side nearest to the door leading to the lasers, which is how our Toreador got out, but we couldn't get through before the guards saw us. Our sneaking is 1 point lower, which is likely enough to make a difference when we're this close to them. But speed is also a factor, so instead of spending XP, we tried again with celerity, which is at 3, and that got us out unseen. It's easy to reach where the sarcophagus should be from there, but it's gone. The prince suspects the Nosferatu who told him where the sarcophagus was stole it. We're sent to Hollywood to find them, but we have to gain the Baron's approval first. There are side quests as well, but I'm only going to cover ones that involve combat. We have to keep the zombies in the graveyard from breaking out, which I was worried about as the zombies are resistant to bashing damage, and defending the 2 gates without just going to a corner and cheesing it demands solid DPS, but celerity saved the day yet again and we got through on the first try. The dot of firearms we get from the Gravekeeper is useless, but we gain 3 XP. We also fought a hunter disguised as a dancer, and she was much easier to beat this time. Not only do we deal more damage in close combat than our Toreador, we also got celerity to work. I think disciplines are supposed to fail near her, but we activated celerity before entering the room and benefited from it for pretty much the entire fight. Back to what the Baron wants, we go through some minor annoyances to bring him a tape that shows a woman being torn apart by monsters, and the Baron sends us to the house from the tape to investigate. It turns out there's a Tzimisce flesh crafter, but he was easy for our Toreador, so we weren't exactly quaking in our boots. We easily rip apart the monsters he summons, and he doesn't attack directly, so we're in almost no danger. We also have enough unarmed combat to deal decent damage to the Tzimisce despite Vampire's inherent bashing soak. We have to wander through the sewers afterwards until we find the Nosferatu Warrens, but we skip the worst of that by hacking a 7 difficulty terminal to open a shortcut. The Nosferatu leader refuses to tell us who stole the sarcophagus for free. He recently lost contact with an informant in Chinatown, so as far as the main quest is concerned, that's our next stop. However, a lot of side quests open up after meeting with the Nosferatu. Most of them are stealth and hacking, so we won't discuss them in detail, but we do get a free dot of computers by finding a data disk for Tongue, as well as an ancient amulet for finding eyes for Mr. Ox that grants a dot of security. Unfortunately, one of the other quests bugged. I didn't mention it last time, as frankly it's long and the fight wasn't that interesting, but this time when we entered the public library, there were tons of static Sabbat. We're supposed to pick up vacuum tubes to fix the elevator to the main floor, but we can't reach them. It's hard to even see them because a bunch of Sabbat are standing on them. I loaded back and re-entered a few times, but even on an attempt that looked normal, haunted trolley notwithstanding, there was an invisible wall in front of the tubes. Thankfully, completely restarting the game and loading a save right before we entered the library fixed it, allowing us to confront a Lasombra that proved to be a bit tougher in melee. He teleports, but it's more of a delay than anything else as he doesn't do much damage at range. However, he has a sword that cuts chunks out of our health with ease. We had to break out the blood bags for the first time to beat him. The only other notable fight was against the gargoyle in the Asian theater. It turns out we get this quest from the Hollywood Baron, Isaac, not the Tremere Regent, which caused me to miss it in the blood bags only run because I just kept checking with the Regent. If we speak to the Regent after we speak to Isaac, the Regent tells us about the gargoyle and admits he created it, and he can be persuaded to give us an artifact that reduces the gargoyle's damage in exchange for putting the gargoyle down without telling Isaac where it came from. If we do so, the Regent rewards us with the Fey Charm, an artifact that gives us a dot of dexterity. We could persuade the gargoyle to join forces with Isaac instead, but I wanted to see how the fight would go. It turns out we have a great build for it, although a melee specialist with a sledgehammer might be even better. You'd think punching stone would be a bad idea, but we smash it to bits with a little help from celerity. We speak to Meng Zhao about the informant, as well as a wereshark we're hunting. At least this time I knew where the fish market was. It was much harder to beat in close combat than it was at range, but we could cheese it by waiting until it threw a rock, and then closing in to attack, which would sometimes cause it to just throw the rock over and over, which has yet to do any damage whatsoever, instead of using its far more dangerous claws. Avoiding damage was only half the equation, though. Unarmed attacks have short range, and for some reason, the wereshark's collision, the area he occupies and pushes us out of, seems to be bigger than his hitbox when he's in a neutral stance. The only time I could get our standard unarmed combo to land was when he tried to throw something. Otherwise, we had to fall back on a slower 2-hit combo triggered by attacking while backing away. A pouncing attack followed by a kick. The hunter we were helping could shoot it, but she wasn't keen on moving to line up shots. We rescue the Red Dragon's owner's daughter. I have no idea why Meng Zhao risked pointing us towards the Red Dragon when she's the one pulling the strings to have them put down. I suppose the alliance between her and LaCroix is built on their shared enthusiasm for shooting themselves in the foot. We had a bit more trouble with the rescue this time, as Kiki kept getting stuck on a door until one of the guards spotted her, but we eventually got her down the stairs and out the back door. Of course, that wasn't enough to find the informant. We also had to fend off thugs in a warehouse and pummel a nightclub owner, neither of which gave us trouble. That brings us to the Foo Syndicate, also known as the reason we've held onto a revolver. We can dance through the laser grid, which I had a far easier time with in third person, but I was worried we'd have no choice but to shoot the junction boxes powering the blades in the next chamber. To be perfectly honest, I only tried punching the bars in front of them to prove it wouldn't work. But right as I decided, that's enough punching to cover my ass, time to shoot the boxes, the bars broke. We can also get through the next chamber with the capacitors, although it's tricky. We have to hop onto these little metal plates for extra height and then jump and punch at just the right time to hit the capacitors. And we have to hit each one several times, all while taking considerable damage from the electricity. We had to break out the blood bags to get through them. I was also worried about the final chamber with the flamethrowers, but we can destroy one of the tanks with punches and survive the explosion. It didn't even do much damage despite being fire, oddly enough. And from there we had no trouble taking out the security guards and freeing the informant. The Nosferatu called to tell us the sarcophagus was stolen by the Giovanni, so it's time to take a cab out to their mansion. We persuade a couple in the driveway they're too drunk to attend and take their invitations, allowing us into the party. We grab an artifact that increases XP rewards, a dodge book, and a book for the Nagaraja on our way to the catacombs. We run past some zombies and find the sarcophagus at long last, but Kuei Jin agents are guarding it and they prove a lot tougher to beat without guns. Even with celerity, which had 3 or 4 dots by this point, they'd slip hits in, and they dealt a lot of damage even through the heavy leather clothing we bought in Chinatown and our 11 combat defense, 5 wits, 5 dodge, and the Wekapog Thistle. Their other abilities hit with the ferocity of a golden retriever puppy, thankfully, but we had to use a few blood bags just fending off their basic attacks. Our damage was also mediocre, and with our brawl maxed in our strength at 4, I don't see it getting better unless we frenzy. We could use potence, but it's only adding 1 extra point of damage per dot we put in it, so I'm not sure how much it would do. Most in-game bosses also have significant bashing soak, and even the claws dropped by the Claw Brother won't fix this. They have a melee combat requirement, so I assume they scale off melee combat, not unarmed combat. Unfortunately, we need a key to the sarcophagus, and the only lead we have is the professor who dug it up. Of course, he's been taken into protective custody by vampire hunters. We have a much easier time against them than our Toreador since we're free to feed to fuel celerity and presence. Celerity is now maxed out, but to be frank, I wish we'd kept it at 3. I found the difference between 3 and 4 dots negligible, and at 5 the controls felt floaty. The physics got even jankier, and I found it nauseating. Maybe it'd be better in first person, but close combat forces the camera into third person, so we're stuck with it. We started upgrading presence, and it was better than I gave it credit for. Lowering foes' perception, wits, strength, and attack rate makes us more likely to hit, more likely to dodge or block their hits, and the debuff aura makes it easier to tell where they are in the dark. We tore through the hunters, including Bach, who drew the fight out by flashbanging us with faith but only shot us once. And we rescued the professor, but he didn't know where the key was. It was stolen from the boat before we set foot there. The Sabbat attacked LaCroix while we were gone. Sadly, they weren't successful, so he's still around to order us to eliminate them. Getting through their lair is only slightly harder than getting through the monastery. While we can't diablerize the vampires, we can drink their thralls who are conveniently wearing matching hoodies. The Zamisi puts up a better fight than he did the first time round. He attacks us in a flesh-crafted war form. I think it's called a Zulu form or something along those lines. The only time I looked into playing as a Misi, I was looking at Cordunic Sorcerer and was promptly told that that wasn't going to happen, so... But anyway, the Zamisi deals heavy damage in this form, and we don't have the good fortune to frenzy this time, so the pummeling takes longer. He also kept jumping into the blood pool and wasting our celerity, forcing us to drink another bag to fuel it and heal, but we first tried him. Meng Zhao approaches us outside and reveals she has the sarcophagus key, and LaCroix asks her to slay Grout and shapeshift into Nines on the way out to frame him. LaCroix denies this and lifts the blood hunt on Nines. He then asks us to head to the last round to negotiate an alliance with them against the Kuei Jin. We've been friendly with the Anarchs up to this point, so once we tell them the blood hunt is over, they tell us Nines has been hiding out in the state park. Unfortunately, the forest is set on fire shortly after we arrive, and angry werewolves cut off our conversation with Nines. We have to deal with one of the werewolves, but celerity makes turning on the power and crushing it with the observatory a simple matter. That brings us to the endgame. LaCroix calls a blood hunt out on us after accusing us of slaying Nines for the Kuei Jin, but Jack, one of the older Anarchs, warns us and arranges for a taxi to meet us on the far side of town. We have enough sneaking to get there without a fight and tell the cab driver we wish to side with the Anarchs, so he brings us to a hotel where Nines is hiding. He has the werewolf pelt to show off, but he's still healing from the encounter, so it's up to us to take down LaCroix and the Kuei Jin. The Kuei Jin are up first, and Meng Zhao's followers put up hardly any resistance. Between our high combat defense and presence, they can hardly hit us, and even when they do, they hardly scratch us thanks to our body armor. We even survived one of the blade traps that I thought was an insta-kill. Meng Zhao, however, is far harder to deal with in close combat than she was at range. Even with maxed out celerity and presence, we don't deal nearly as much damage as I'd like, and she hits hard. I hoped we wouldn't have to worry about cutting off her tentacles, which grow into clones, since we're unarmed. We don't even have protean claws, and yet her tentacles were severed repeatedly. We went after the clones, but in retrospect, I think we'd have been better off focusing on Meng Zhao. The clones were exceptionally hard to hit while small, even with celerity, as they were too short for most attacks. We fell back on the pounce and kick combo, but even it was unreliable. It took ages and was by far the most blood bag intensive battle of the run, but we eventually beat Meng Zhao to a pulp through sheer stubbornness. Still, it was a hard enough fight to explain why my first gangrel got their backside handed to them. Of course, we still had LaCroix to deal with, or more accurately, his sheriff. Making our way up the building wasn't too bad. The lower floors had plenty of security guards to feed on, and presence not only weakened the commandos, but also helped us find them thanks to its debuff aura. Celerity allowed us to easily take down and defuse the dominated guard, and from there it was a straight shot to the sheriff. The first phase wasn't as painless as it was for our Toreador. Celerity gave us time to react when he teleported behind us, but even if we staggered him, his strikes landed every time, forcing us to trade damage where a ranged character could avoid it entirely. Our body armor helped, but we needed to use a couple blood bags to get through it. The second phase was easier, as Man-Bat got stuck in a loop after we downed him the first time. For some reason, the searchlight never turned off and he kept flying into the beam, which knocked him right back down. He didn't stay down long after the first stun. I think maybe there's a cooldown where if he gets knocked down repeatedly, he gets up quicker for a while. But we got a couple punches in each time and we never had to worry about his screech. With his pet bat gone, LaCroix was defenseless. As much as I hate the Kuei Jin as a concept, at least Meng Zhao could fight. So we turned him into a werewolf and had a dance party, proving that yes, you can beat Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines with only unarmed damage. This run was easy until a couple bosses near the end, namely the Chang brothers and Meng Zhao. If we hadn't built our character well and brought blood bags, we would have been in trouble against them. I wonder how a gangrel would have fared without celerity and presence. I doubt Protean would make up for them, but I have another run idea kicking around that we may play a gangrel in, so we may do that instead of another unarmed run. We'll see. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already. It helps the channel, and while I will always play a variety of games because challenge running the same game over and over does my head in, games that do well will be featured more often, so if you want to see more of a certain game, watching, liking, and sharing its runs are the best ways to make that happen. Channel memberships are also a thing if you want to support the channel directly, get your name in the credits at the start of challenge runs, and get access to new runs as soon as they're uploaded. usually a few days before they're public. But regardless of all that, thank you for watching to the very end of the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.